Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Vacation. I mean, miniatures. Yeah, it is vacation time. I am officially on vacation, and what better way to start it with a book that I have spent many vacations pondering over, and that is The Adventure into Fear Omnibus from Marvel Comics, obviously, because it says Marvel up there, and you can see it's Morbid in time, because we got Morbius on the cover. Adventure into Fear is a bit of a funky book because it doesn't really know what it wanted to do until the tail end of its publication. It kind of goes all over the place, and honestly, for that reason, I really like it. You can see it's also quite a fat, thick book, clocking in at well over 800 pages, but it's got a little bit of everything. It is a very 1970s Bronze Age comic, and it's absolutely obvious. It is all 31 issues of the Fear comic. It does obviously include the original Morbius stories, but it also has Man-Thing in most of his original color appearances. But more interestingly than that is if you look at the cover, we've got full-on Kirby monster stuff as well. Now, I mean, I was aware when I first got into comic collecting, which was probably in the early 90s, that Marvel did do a lot of this stuff, kind of just very scattershot style publishing in the 70s. And I was more aware of that because I actually have a cousin who was a hardcore, and I mean, I'm not using that term very lightly at all here, hardcore collector. I can remember reading just loose floppy copies of the original appearance of Wolverine and Punisher and all these big major players. Yeah, my cousin literally had a room in their place that was, I kid you not, 3 of the walls, floor to ceiling, comics, floppy comics, bagged and tagged. I don't know what he's done with that collection since. I'll probably have to ask his dad, because my cousin was a few years older than me at the time. Lives on the other side of the world, unfortunately. Haven't had a lot of contact with him since. He's been a very busy dude. But, I mean, the amount of stuff. And so he would school me every time we go visit or see them. And he would give me all kinds of lectures and info on comics and their history. And, I mean, this is so my kind of book. This is just crazy monsters, page after page. I would have absolutely been gobbling this stuff up back in the 70s if I was a actual functioning child at that point, considering I was born in 78. Yeah, I've dated myself officially, but yeah, this stuff, I mean, you know, it was already getting pricey in the back issue bins at that time, and you know, I was there for the image explosion, so I am quite well aware of, you know, that's where my money was going. I had to get the hot newness, but my heart has always belonged to the stuff of previous years. And you can see right here with just a quick look at who's who involved in this. I mean, we've got kind of the old school and the new school, or at least some of the people that would become part of the new school. So that's always kind of cool to see. I mean, that's some really big names there. Kirby, obviously, Don Heck, Ditko, Val Merrick, I remember seeing a lot of his work growing up. Starlin, obviously, Gullisy, Kane, P. Craig Russell. I mean, these are some pretty big names. Bill Everett. I only think there's one story by Everett, but it really was quite a looker, I thought. Manili, you know, he was tragically died early. Didn't really get to continue on into the superhero era of Marvel. He was mainly an Atlas illustrator. I mean, Chaykin, Gene Colan. I mean, these are all names that I am quite familiar with, so that is always cool to see. And what's interesting is, besides the fact that we have 31 issues all piled in here, and I wonder if some of these are actually complete. They feel a bit incomplete. But the publication order, the stories are just all over this place. So yeah, they're all primarily monster stories. There are a few just of the, you know, spooky, eerie sort that, you know, Lee and Ditko would do a lot of in, like, amazing fantasy books like that. And I'm sure a lot of those stories are going to end up in the Ditko Omnibus, which I have yet to get. But You know, look, it's like 59, 60, 61. The dates are just 61, 63, 63, 59. They're just kind of all over the place. So there's no real rhyme or reason to these stories. And unfortunately, I do wish that the contents page is actually listed out who drew each of these stories. It would be kind of nice. But, you know, it's pretty obvious when you really get into it. Obviously, with those big Kirby splash pages, it's quite apparent. But I don't think, like, this very first story, other than Kirby's name being on there, there's no sign that he actually worked on it. So I don't know if that was just at the time. You know, we have a very EC style look to the early sci-fi stories, which I think is kind of cool too. Being a big EC fan, I got to get that Ray Bradbury book. I'm totally going to get that Ray Bradbury book. In fact, maybe I'll just go order it for myself after this. I guess I have to find out if I do or not. And the stories run the gamut of, like I said, the traditional, you know, strange and eerie. There's a couple of old horror stories in here from the late 50s. You know, the rampaging monsters. Lots and lots of Kirby stuff, which is always fun. And we get into just, you know, cool aliens and creatures. That, to me, was the best part. That looks very Ditko-ish. I'm looking at that guy's facial features. I was right. And there's that author's signature. Usually his stuff is pretty apparent. This looks pretty old, though. Spaceships, UFOs. We've got a couple of the longer stories. I want to say that must be the one from like 63, because this feels a lot more long form, which was not something that often happened with the early suspense stories of, you know, Astonishing Tales, Strange Suspense, or whatever. I don't even remember all the different books that were out there that eventually transitioned to the superhero stuff. And that looks like a pretty Ditko cover as well. Yep, it is. So that's about the first half of the book. I don't remember which issue actually introduces Man-Thing, because he's the first modern story. That's in, let's see, well, the first new story appears in issue 9, and that is The Greatest Magician of All, which was Bill Everett. I'm going to pop over to that, and then we see Man-Thing first appear in issue 10. Okay. Wow, we got a while to go. So you've got a good couple hundred pages of vintage Marvel, sci-fi, horror, spooky stuff. One look means doom. Wow. Who drew that? That's Kirby. The fingers are always a good giveaway for Ditko illustrations. I took a journey into fear. Dude could draw. I'm like totally giving away some of these, you know, surprise twist endings. Some of these stories are really short, some are quite long. It's kind of interesting to see. And a lot of times the covers were actually new illustrations as well. So I think it was issue 9, I said. Yeah. This is the first, quote-unquote, modern, for-the-time story. And Bill Everett was busy. God, he was drawing like Submariner and stuff back in the 40s, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure it was Everett. Dude had been around, but like the quality of the artwork, I mean, he was a good artist. There was no denying that. I always like this angle. I mean, just his composition of how he was putting together the panels. He knew what he was doing. And this is about the time we have stuff like, you know, House of Mystery and all the DC horror books popping up as well. Good time to be a horror fan. You've got, you know, Creepy and Eerie from Warren Publishing in full throttle. And then finally, when we get to, I think this is like 73, Man-Thing is in issue 10. And he actually isn't the only story in that, which was kind of interesting to see. Because while we do have it, and it's not the best looking story, we do have the traditional old school backup stories as well. I always forget if this Man-Thing story was originally in the magazines or in this one. I can't recall. So what happens for a good chunk of these mid-season issues, so to speak, is we've got a lot of Swamp Thing stories, and then we have a bunch of, backup features before we switch over to Morbius, and then Morbius takes over the whole book at that point. But I love the fact that everything gets into these weird cosmic, dimension-hopping stories. Like, we've barely started Man-Thing. He's had a couple of adventures out in the bayou or whatever. This one with the escaped convict. And then we're off to other dimensions. Because it's the 70s. To me, that's like that sums up like 70s comic books. Let's have them travel to other dimensions so we can draw all kinds of cool, funky monsters and sexy sorceresses. And I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm a big fan of like Ditko's Doctor Strange stuff. It was already kind of set in the pace. Ooh, some classic stereotypes. We'll just skip over that story there. So yeah, Man-Thing is really going all out at this point with its crazy dimension, sorcery, what have you. Shamans and voodoo priests. Some of the stuff I wonder if they were just looking for an excuse to draw some weird stuff. Man-Thing is funky. There's just no denying that. See? Now we're fighting, fantasy warriors and floating castles. And then Morbius shows up. I want to say at this point, Man-Thing kind of takes his own book. But the crazy thing is, Morbius now, since we don't have Man-Thing running around, is going to be fighting his interdimensional craziness as well. Because I guess just being a living vampire isn't enough, right? We need to have all kinds of occultism and then a story from like the early 60s, late 50s. Before eventually fully taking over the book himself. Cat people. Why not, right? Look, what is going on at this point? I've read these and I don't remember myself, but this is Craig Russell drawing this one. Back before he really refined his style, but, shades of Melnibone and his Elric stuff. Because giant cyclopsian monster people are what I think of when I think of living vampires. But man, what an excuse just to draw cool, crazy stuff, right? That's what I love about this book. It just has a very everything in the kitchen sink type approach to it. There is something for everyone in this book. So if you dig some of the sci-fi, if you dig the horror, you dig the fantasy, there's a lot going on here. And yeah, because that's a thing, right? Hell Eyes. And then finally in the back, we've got a bunch of reprint covers. Some of these I can't even remember seeing. Ooh, this book is heavy. Gil Kane drew that one. That explains the familiarity of it. These look like the original cover art, yeah. 10 cents for these books. Oh my gosh. I like this Zootax story. That was a pretty cool one. Guy paints with magic colors to create an army of monsters for an ancient Aztec priest buried in the Yucatan. So yeah, big book. Lots to enjoy here. And like I said, this was like my go-to vacation book. I forget even when I got it, maybe a year or two ago. But it was like every time I had a day off, I would just, flip to a random page and start reading some of the stories. And the cool thing is that, yeah, there is a couple of stories that overlap with like the Kirby book, the Monster Bus. And I'm assuming as well with the Ditko one. But, this is reprinting the entire adventure into Fear when it was just called Fear as well. So it is kind of nice to have all that in one convenient location. I do like when Marvel does that. I'm a sucker for omnibuses. I'm not super keen and into the current Marvel stuff. Every now and then there's something, but to me, this is like, there's a lot to enjoy here, I think. You have, on one hand, the quick 3 or 4 page gotcha type stories. You've got a few more long form experimental stories with the sci-fi stuff, paving the way for the multi-issue arcs with Morbius at the very end. So there's a lot to see here. And I mean, it's kind of cool to see the origins of a lot of these characters as well. So if you're lucky like me, I got myself a remaindered copy. So just because of that dot, I think I paid maybe $25-30 when the cover price is $150. So I'm cool with that. It is always worth checking Amazon to see every now and then when they have this stuff marked down, because you can get these for a steal, and if you don't mind those little marks, I personally don't, I say take advantage of it. So good luck in your hunting. If you guys have any interesting omnibuses that you think would be a good fit for this channel, if you ever want to see any on a Friday, by all means let me know. But I'm gonna go grab myself another drink to sip on, because I'm not going to work today, and I will talk to you guys all later. So with that said, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here soon. Bye bye.